Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, your guide to traveling, investing, and living beyond borders, where we talk about living the life that you want to live, where you want to live it. From beautiful San Miguel de Allende, smack in the middle of Mexico, with your hosts, Jonathan Lockwood and James Guzman.
Welcome to the Borderless Podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders. This is that podcast that tries to be a resource for those of you who are considering moving beyond your borders, who maybe want to live more internationally, who are looking for a location-independent business, something to help them get on their way. My name's Jonathan Lockwood. I'm here with James Guzman. Hey, James.
Hey, Jonathan. What's going on?
Well, what's going on with you? I mean, I've been busting my ass. I've been doing more auditions recently and winning some new voiceovers, which is good.
Right, I saw you busting your ass in town yesterday, right? Doing some day drinking and.
Oh yeah, yeah, that was good. Cecilia and I went to Costco in Celaya. Every now and then I have to do that, and then we just sort of
strolled around town, huh?
Yeah, we just I picked up my daughter's birthdays later this month, so I wanted to get her some little stuff, and then we just went day drinking from one place to another. Right. We went to Choperia, which I don't go to that much anymore. Right. I really like that place.
Yeah, you had some cheese curds.
Yeah. Well, they don't call them that in Mexico, but they're cheese curds as far as I'm concerned. I've been to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, a cool thing happened not that long ago. Who was it Fergus Hodgson who asked you to be a part of that little debate?
Yeah, one of the girls that works at Pan Am Post, but him. Yeah.
Right. And so you were asked to participate in sort of an online debate, and it was you versus Carla Gericke, I believe her name is, who identifies with the Free State Project and is involved very heavily with them. And the question posed was, should liberty lovers leave the United States? And so you were asked to be the sort of pro voice in that, and she was kind of against that. And what was cool is, I mean, it's like we always say, I mean, I'm not interested in shoving people out of the United States who want to stay there, but these debates are helpful, perhaps for those listening to this podcast who are not clear. Maybe they still are holding on to some ideologies that make them think maybe it's a bad thing to leave and that they should kind of stay and fight for freedom in the United States. So for those people, the things brought up here were, I think, quite brilliant. Yeah,
I mean, it's hard for me to really think and have the mentality that a lot of people do. That I don't know. A lot of the arguments that I see against leaving the United States, I can't even wrap my head around. I think it's probably because I had a lot of experience when I was younger, living in different cultures and stuff like that. So to me, it's like, why wouldn't you? I don't understand what's the big deal. You know what I mean? If you don't feel like you like it there or what's going on. There's 200 plus countries in the world. Why wouldn't you just go check out some other places? Even if it's not the best place in the world, just go out and find some new places and be an interesting person. But anyways, I thought it was interesting, and I thought that we could kind of expand on it because there were still a lot of comments and people that seem to think that leaving the United States is a non-option. So
Right. And so it was a good opportunity, and we thought what we would do is do a podcast based specifically on this. And, it's funny, I didn't grab a bio on Pete Sisco, but many of the people who listen to this podcast and are looking in on the Borderless Network private Facebook page are familiar with our guest today, who is Pete Sisco. Welcome, Pete Sisco, to the Borderless Podcast.
Hi, guys. It's nice to be back. Way up from podcast number 7.
Oh, yeah. Oh, is it? Yeah, it's been a while. And so that one was such a favorite among our listeners, and you made a lot of excellent points on that thread we started in the Borderless Podcast Facebook page that we thought, wow, what better guy to have on to discuss this concept. So those of you who are not intimately acquainted with Pete Sisco, this is a guy who's been known for many, many years in the strength building and bodybuilding world. He's a guy who figured out a kind of a formula for measuring output as it relates to building strength and building muscle. He's a Canadian, but he lived in California for a very long time. But he has, in his 40s, left the USA, living in Belize, Mexico, China, Thailand, England, and Spain. Where are you today, Pete?
I'm in fabulous Valencia, Spain. We've been here, my wife and I have been here 2.5 months. And next up, we're going to Thailand and Vietnam.
Beautiful. Fantastic. So you are all over the place. And I know so how long have you been doing this? 10, 15 years? How long?
I've been like a permanent traveler for just over 9 years. In March, it'll be 10 years.
Okay, very good. And in the beginning, you had all your kids with you, right?
Yeah, in the early days, which goes back even before those 10 years, it was more domestic travel all around the U.S., into Canada a few times, not much international stuff because we had 6 kids.
Right.
And that's a lot to organize. Even when we went to Florida, it felt like booking a convention.
Right. And so you obviously have the thought about living internationally being a good idea, exposing you to a lot of other things, and maybe dispensing with these ideas that the place where you were planted is the place where you need to keep growing. And this idea was transferred to your kids, many of whom are living outside of their country of birth, correct?
Yeah, that's true. At times, the family's on 4 different continents, and I actually started early because when I was 26, I left Canada, which is where I was born and grew up. So that's 30 years ago now.
Right.
So that's first of all, I left there, and then my kids were all born in the United States, but now. Right now, the ones that are outside the U.S. are in Costa Rica, Ethiopia, and China.
Ethiopia, wow.
Yeah, well, my daughter's an anthropologist, and really she fell in love with the Rift Valley and everything that means to anthropologists.
Yeah.
And she just moved there.
Beautiful. Well, I've had an opportunity to visit the Rift Valley as it flows through Kenya there, and it is... nothing prepares you for Africa, I think, when you go there. It's amazing.
Yeah. I haven't been there yet, and we will definitely go. But that is, that's just an absolutely critical area to anyone who's an archaeologist or an anthropologist. So it's a magnet.
Okay.
And the important thing is that she's doing the thing that is, closest to her heart. That's an important thing for anybody. And that's, getting back to our kindred spirits who are freedom lovers, but they feel like, the way to do it is stay in the U.S., fight for what's right. And in particular, I think the guys that you were debating with, James, were the Free State people out of New Hampshire,
yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
The thing is that, I to debate those guys, I feel like I'm debating a brother.
Right.
Because we really have very close to the same values, just a disagreement as to how to go about it. And if I understand their strategy, it's that, you get a million people or more to move to New Hampshire, and then you become the dominant voting bloc. And, you dominate the state legislature, you change the rules around to the way you'd like them to be. And ultimately, you secede from the United States and, create your own state, or maybe even a stateless state. I think that's basically.
Well, why don't we, Pete, let me interrupt you. Let me go ahead and read this one sentence explanation that she has. She says, so let's just be fair to them. This is what they are saying it is. This radical social movement seeks to concentrate 20,000 liberty lovers in one geographic area, that's New Hampshire, to, quote, exert the fullest practical effort toward the creation of a society in which the maximum role of government is the protection of individuals' rights to life, liberty, and property, end quote. And so, let's be clear, they certainly aren't talking about a stateless society. They're talking about a small government in which government is about the protection of life, liberty, and property. That's what they're saying.
Right. Well, in 1780, 1785, the United States had that largely. Mm-hmm. And in under 200 years, it grew into the behemoth, the Leviathan, the trillion-dollar debt machine with war on an industrial scale. It did all of that in about 200 years. So, at best, if you took that strategy, of, let's just have a really, really small coercive state, it's going to build itself back up again. And I would bet this time it won't take 200 years.
Right. Excellent point. So, James, why don't you share with us in your opening paragraph your thought? James, never one to pull any flipping punches. Who should stay and fight, so to speak?
Okay, so in the beginning paragraph, because so it was 450 words. It's not many words, so I didn't have time to kind of elaborate. But I'm, as well as you and most other people, that are living an expat lifestyle, we're not here to convince anybody else to move out of their home state or country or whatever. That's not what I'm here for. But what I was saying is that if you feel like that your country is the best, and which happened to be the most of the comments were saying, oh, well, nowhere else is as free and as good as the United States. A lot of people believe that. And if you really believe that, you probably haven't been out of the United States or been anywhere that's good, because there's a lot of awesome places in the world. It depends on what freedoms that you like. And to me, it just shows that you have this nationalistic mentality that, it's just not, it's funny because there are even some expats that leave the United States out of spite for the United States.
Right.
And then what they do is they hate their country, and then they go and they talk about how great their new country is. And I think that that's also it's this nationalism that you have. And it's just looking at different places kind of objectively and choosing where you'd rather live, and not having this emotional thing like you have to be attached to this nation state, So anyway, so that was the first paragraph, that if you do have that and you can't, get out of that mentality that, the country that you were born in is the best country in the world, then you probably should stay. I mean, that's where you're going to be. So where you're going to be happy unless you change that idea,
Right. I think that's true. I mean, I think just generally speaking, let's take any ideology out of this. Mm-hmm. Most people, I think, tend to stay close to home unless they have some really great reason to leave. And if they find no great reason to leave, well, they usually stay where they are. Wouldn't you say that's true, Pete?
Yeah, well, inertia is very powerful, for one thing. So there's a tendency to stay where you are automatically.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's the case. I mean, I think that, I wish I'd pulled this up in anticipation of today's conversation, because I think I found something some years ago that just talked about the idea that generally the less education a person has, the less likely they are to leave their home area. But there was also an element of, as the need arises. Now, I come from Detroit. I come from Southeast Michigan, where there was this huge boom in auto worker jobs, 50 years ago. And so there was this enormous influx of people who may not have been very well educated, who moved up there simply for the job. So there was a powerful reason for them, Mm-hmm. But without that great reason, people mostly tend to stay where they're planted, like I said. But so let's talk about some of the other reasons that people gave. I really appreciated some of the things that people threw out on our page. Mm-hmm. Really, within, it seemed like 30 minutes, we had all of these great arguments for leaving, And Gabriel Scheer, who's one of our friends in Chile down there, part of that Fort Galt project, he said, every minute you spend fighting is a minute you could have spent living. Why don't you talk about that for us, Pete?
Yeah, well, that's a principle that I agree with. And I'll get to that, but it just occurred to me when you were talking about the United States. The United States, the truly great thing about the founding of the United States is it was the one country that put the individual above the government. Mm-hmm. It put the individual above the state. That we the people, we have all the rights, and we're going to give a few of them to the state. And that was a revolutionary idea, and it is the most important thing about the United States. But somehow along the way, that nationalism gets fostered, where people literally take on a viewpoint that the nation is more important than the individual, and that's like the most anti-American thing that you could really that you could really support, because America was the one place after all those centuries, all those millennia, it was the place where they said, no, the individual is above the state. And we're just going to give a few rights to the state, but they are very, very limited. And then over time, of course, once you get the power to coerce other people, you can just consolidate that and grow the power and put your finger in more and more pies until the individual is just treated like an afterthought. Mm-hmm. The individual is there to serve the state. Get to work, pay your taxes, do what you're told. And that's a very, it's fundamentally un-American to support that kind of society. So
yeah, and I think another thing that happened. I can't speak for every country. I'm sure it's happened in many countries, but it certainly was the case in the United States. It became a fusion for not all, but I think many, into their sense of religion, their sense of quote unquote God and country. And when I've heard people pose this question, is there some sort of blessing that you think a divine creator bestowed upon this patch of land? Is it a geographical thing?
There are people that think that, how she was at the Manifest Destiny and all this type of stuff. I mean, a lot of the, the founding of the United States, people did think it has on the money, right? And a lot of things about God and the rest of it.
Yeah, people all over the world are encouraged to think that, national anthems often have something about God blessing that particular country. And religion is just a tried and true tool to use to manipulate people. So, if you're a good Christian, you should think this. If you're a good Muslim, you should think this. And then, those beliefs get turned for political purposes. Yeah. And you see that in too many countries. Right. It's a reason for so much of the conflict in the Middle East, and it's a powerful tool. So I think it's irrelevant. I think that there is a way to construct society so that anyone can practice their own religion without interfering with anyone else, and it could be a non-issue, but I think it's just used to manipulate people.
Right. You said something about just the great freedom that existed in the United States, and then within 200 years, what it became. I loved it. I try to promote this video that I have a tough time sometimes listening to Stefan Molyneux when he's doing his call-in shows. But I love some of the work he's done. I absolutely love it. And there's a video that's very well supported out there. It's called, what is it called again, James? It's
The History of Your Enslavement?
Yes. Yeah. The story of your enslavement. Mm-hmm. And he makes the point, which I can't say that I can debate at all, that always the most free areas give rise to the greatest prosperity and then become the least free areas. It's just a cycle that you see. And it appears to be the cycle that has occurred here, too. There's all of this great prosperity that came from the freedoms that were distributed. That prosperity is fantastic, but then it gives rise to more political parasites who come in and then they just turn the thing on its ear. And so I think that's what we've seen here in the U.S. So you said, Pete, you'd like to see, you think that there is a way to organize society such that ... And you talk about this in your book, The Freedom App, correct?
That's true.
Right. Would you like to share with us just the business card, just sort of the shorthand on that? Tell us about the Freedom App.
Yeah, the elevator pitch for global human freedom.
Right. You can do that.
Yeah. Well, the concept is that the problem in the world is the use of coercion. People can use coercion and benefit from it, and there are no consequences for that. So that's what states do. They say, hey, guess what? When you were born, you signed a social contract. And it's unilateral. We make all these rules. You have to obey the rules. You have to give us half of your lifetime production. You have to do a whole bunch of other things that we say. And if you don't, we put you in a cage for many years. And in some cases, we do worse than that. So that's the way our society operates. And what we're told is, yeah, but you get to vote. Every few years you can vote on something, and you basically vote on who gets coerced.
Right.
Who should pay more taxes? Who should pay less? Where money should go? You get to vote on the coercion. And my premise is that if we start with a definition of what freedom is, and the definition that I use is that it's the condition that exists when every individual has complete control over his own life and property. So if you think about any condition of non-freedom, it's always a person's life or his property being impinged on in an unwanted way. So if you construct a society so that property is always protected, and the people who use coercion are sort of frozen out of the marketplace. If you steal from the butcher, the baker won't sell you any bread, and the electricity company won't sell you any electricity because you stole from the butcher. And until you make good on that, no one else will do business with you either. If you create a society where the individuals are networked in a way that they can do that, it gradually eliminates coercion from being viable as a way for people to profit. And I don't like to use the word profit. I should use the word plunder, because profit is good, right, but plunder is bad.
Excellent point. And like you said, go ahead, finish.
Well, in a nutshell, the idea is that, there are various forms of government. There's monarchies and there's chiefdoms and there's theocracies and there's also democracy. And democracy has served us pretty well, but it's a couple thousand years old. And when we look around us, we can see that democracy is kind of falling apart. It's almost turning into a farce, because we all know now that you can buy the democratic process. So democracy as a technology is not that great. 51% dictating terms to 49% is not that great. And we can do better. And what we need is a system that works better than democracy. And what that system needs to do is protect 7 billion people simultaneously. And I think it can be done. I think that is something that can be constructed in, as fast as a generation or two.
Wow, that's intriguing that it could go that fast. And speaking of speed, in looking back to our friends at the Free State Project, who I've had a number of friends who've been a part of that and probably still are, they have made the expression, this is her second paragraph, Ms. Gericke, the FSP, that is Free State Project, is now at 85% of its goal. Oh, okay, that sounds really good, doesn't it? Then she explains, more than 17,000 participants have pledged to move. That's where the 85% comes. And nearly 2,000 liberty lovers have already moved, with more arriving weekly. So this has been going on since like 2003. So we're now at about 12 years. They're claiming 85% of its goal, but it sounds like close to 10%. And, I don't want to put that down, but it's certainly not happening at any great speed.
Well, they're making an effort, and that's laudable, and they have an idea. I'd like to see them succeed. But the thing is, first of all, I believe if you're just saying, we should just have a very small coercive state. We're just going to coerce people for a little bit of taxes, not too much. That sort of thing. We're going to regulate a little bit of business, but not too much. It's not going to last. It's there's too many people who have figured out how to get something for nothing. The cat's out of the bag. So you could start a state. You could wipe the slate clean in New Hampshire and start with almost no laws, almost no regulation, almost no taxation. But honestly, how long is it going to take to grow into a behemoth?
Right.
And you're never going to get out from under the thumb of the federal government because they make the rules on how you get out. So the federal government is always going to dictate terms. And they might not agree with the low taxes, low regulation, low interference.
And even if they do for a while, they will not forever.
Well, why would the United States government say, there's a 20% federal VAT on everything you buy, but it doesn't include New Hampshire?
Right.
Not
going to happen.
Why would they say there's federal income tax, but you don't have to pay it if you live in New Hampshire?
Right.
Why would they say we've got $1 trillion military, but you don't have to contribute if you live in New Hampshire?
Right.
It's not going to happen.
In just a minute, I want to come back. James did a lot of research on this. Even while he was moving and very sick, he had to write this article and condense it down to 450 words. So I want to make sure he's talking about his approach to this subject. But right now, we need to take just a moment and give some attention to our sponsor. Today's Borderless podcast is brought to you by the Condescending Group, your ringleader in the quest to accumulate self-esteem through no discernible effort. Our friends at the Condescending Group are nothing if not culturally diverse and sensitive, and they highly recommend traveling and living in different countries throughout the world. They love it. They embrace it. But only when you accept their personal social viewpoints. For instance, living amongst the natives of Uganda to dance in ancestral honor ceremonies? Good! Deciding you can live a happier life and minimize taxes by leaving the U.S.? Bad! Improving your French by moving to Paris and staying drunk on wine and cheese for a year? Divine! Starting a business that improves the lives of people in South America? Exploitative profiteering! Trying to teach the indigenous peoples of a remote Pacific island the value of socialized medicine? Bravo! Deciding that you'd rather not live in the frightening shadow of a massive, manipulative, violent, thieving, bloodthirsty warlord? Oh, move to Somalia! For more guidance and direction on all of the ideological acceptable reasons to leave the United States, go to thecondescendinggroup.com. The Condescending Group, they care more than you. Okay, so we're back to the Borderless podcast. Our guest today is Pete Sisco, PeteSisco.com, the Freedom app. And we're talking about stay or leave because James Guzman, our own, was asked to be a part of this conversation on the Pan Am Post. Should liberty lovers leave the United States? And James, your approach to this, we talked about the beginning of it, but you make one point that's really, really good. It's a simpler one, maybe a little bit less ideological and more practical. You say, in order to have more liberty, you need to have the resources necessary to do whatever it is that you'd like to do. And then you say, you make this point that if you have more resources, aren't you living a freer life? Talk about that for a minute.
Well, yeah, and I kind of struggled with the title of the article in the beginning, should liberty lovers leave the United States? Okay, a lot of people kind of understand what that means, and I think what they mean is should libertarians leave the United States? But, the word liberty, what does that actually mean? A lot of people would say different things. I mean, if you ask a totalitarian, they'll probably say that they like liberty in a different way or something, who knows? But anyways, one of the ways that I think certainly a aspect of liberty is doing, having the resources and being able to do what you want to do, in your life. And so it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before with this kind of fighting or living. Yeah, okay, we could sit here and theorize about what might happen if we spend time, voting or not voting or doing this or doing that, and maybe something will happen in the future. Or you could go and live with more liberty today. That's really how I see it. This is why, to me, this doesn't even make any sense. Just, there are a lot of people that are worried about the police state and they don't like a lot of the laws and stuff in the United States. Well, you could leave today. You can go today and live somewhere else, and you don't have all that stuff, happening to you. And you can, I guess people just don't understand how great it is to live in some places. Depending on what you like or you don't like, there are different countries for you, but you can go leave today and you don't have to worry about all this stuff. Another thing I wanted to mention was there's a kind of a libertarian principle about agorism, what you call agorism, which is trying to minimize the state in your life as much as possible. This is what a lot of people practice in New Hampshire, I'm sure. You know, they'll have local markets, or they do things in order to trade with people and go around the state. Well, let me tell you, you know, in my view, the best way to practice agorism is kind of the PT theory, or, you know, permanent traveler, this type of thing. As you're a tourist in another country, you're welcomed. You're not seen as a tax cow, and you can set yourself up to minimize the state in your life. And let me tell you, and I'm sure that Pete can tell you as well, it actually works. I don't want anybody to say, no, you can't. There's no other places free. You can't live with more freedom. I'm telling you, because I do it. Yes, it is. It's amazing. You can do this today. You could go. For people there in New Hampshire, if you get up and you go today and you come to San Miguel de Allende, I bet you'll be blown away by the amount of freedom that you can have, and like I was talking about with the money, how far your money will go, how much your life will improve, and how much freedom you have just being, you know, in a day-to-day basis than you do in the United States. Has that been your experience as well, Pete?
You know, it's been my experience so many times that I've lost count of how often it happens. And also I'm almost at the point where I take it for granted, you know, and every once in a while I have to stop and go, you know, wow, like what just happened? And you know, I think there's one technique that could help people embrace what it's like is when they go on a vacation. You know, people go on a vacation to the Dominican Republic or Costa Rica or to Mexico, and they have a great time. It's like, oh, we just love it. The weather was great. The people were nice. The food was good. Everything was wonderful. And I, you know, can't wait to go back next year. And that's it. That's the taste of, well, you know what? That's right. It's actually better than your cubicle that you go to work in every day, isn't it? You know, it's like, it's way better. It's way better, you know, going out on that sailboat for the sunset cruise and laughing and talking with people and you know, meeting new people and telling stories and having fun. That makes for a really great vacation.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, it makes for a really great life too.
Yeah.
Because you can do it time and time again in different places. You know, we said off the top that we've been in Spain 2.5 months. It's really been fantastic. We're not the least bit sick of it. My wife has a U.S. passport, so she's got a 90-day limit in the EU countries. So we planned around that, and next we're going to go to Southeast Asia. But it's great here, and we're not sick of it. And the other day, I had an ear problem in my left ear, and we just looked up online where there was a ear, nose, and throat clinic, and we found one nearby that's an annex to a hospital, and we just walked over. In fact, we walked over at about 5 p.m. and I explained that I don't speak much Spanish. And did they have someone who could see me who spoke English? And that's the only reason I had to wait 20 minutes.
Yeah.
They had to find the physician that was available that could speak to me in English. The thing is, I got in to see immediately a specialist, an ENT, ear, nose, and throat specialist. Immediately, she spent a half an hour with me, fixed my problem completely, wrote me a prescription, and one of the drugs is a scheduled drug that the DEA would put the handcuffs on you for having. Now, see, here's the thing. I also have a British passport. I could have flashed the British passport and said, hey, give me the EU reciprocity thing, you know. But I don't like doing that anyway. I don't like being part of these systems. So I told him I'd just be paying cash. I told him that right up front. It was 80 euros. It's like $88.
Yep.
$88. They literally did not take my name. There wasn't any. No. There was no paperwork to fill out. She just solved my problem, and wrote me a script for the medications I needed. I went down one block and got those filled immediately. Not even, we'll have these ready for you in 90 minutes, come back. I mean, immediately, here they are.
Yeah.
And because there was that one that was a scheduled drug, they did ask to see identification, so I showed them a passport. But it's done.
Yeah.
And the whole thing took, I don't know what, an hour or so. And like what I lived in the U.S. for 20 years. I know what that takes. You want to see a specialist? Good luck. And then, you got to go to the GP. And if you're somewhere where you haven't been before, it's like, number one, you're a new patient. So there goes $150. Number two, it's a consultation. First of all, it's a consultation. There's another $100. Number three, I'm actually going to do a procedure on your ear, so there's another couple $100. And number four, I'm going to send you down the street to a pharmacy where you're going to pay quadruple. That's the other thing I didn't tell you. Those three medications, 14 euros. Yeah. So it's like, what is that? $16 or something. Yeah,
and that's been my experience as well in Spain. I had the same type of thing. I had to go to the same type of doctor, and it was very simple and easy. And here in Mexico as well, I had LASIK surgery. And it was the same exact thing. I mean, even for LASIK surgery, I went in, I talked to the doctor, I looked at his equipment and all that type of stuff. In the United States, I was looking at about $3,500 or $4,000. And here I paid $750. It was exactly the same, all cash, didn't look at anything, in and out, nice hospital with all the equipment, no problem.
And they gave you a couple shots of tequila to go, right?
Well, not exactly. But and then another thing, I had a moped accident when I was in Acapulco. I crashed a moped, and I was in the hospital for 3 days. And I had like internal bleeding and all this type of stuff. And the whole thing, and when I walked out, I did pay cash for that as well. And at the time, I was on a tourist visa, okay? And I walked out. I had to pay cash for the whole thing. It was 4 days. Now, it was a public hospital. It wasn't a private hospital, so it would have been more money. But it was $250 for 3 days in the hospital and an ambulance. So imagine in the United States, that would have been bankrupt. That would have been done. You know what I mean? And just all kinds of things where it's like tickets and things like that, like you were talking about with the medical things, where it just keeps dragging on and on and on. It's the same thing in the United States. Oh, you have a beer in the street and they give you a ticket, which this has happened to me, so I know this is what happens. And this drags on for years and years and whatever. You got to pay this and court fees and whatever for some stupid infringement. Let me tell you something. If that happens almost anywhere else on earth, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. If somebody does get upset about it, then they'll just say, oh, can you not do that? And you say, oh, okay, sorry, and you go back. That's what civilized people do, by the way. So anyways.
Right. Yeah, well, what's happened, that you're bringing up another issue, which is all these local and regional state governments that are going bankrupt, and they send the cops out to generate income, and they're just writing tickets all the time for minor things that have huge fines attached to them because they all need the money. It's just money gathering. So there's a not so hidden tax there in the form of the harassment you get for minor things. And again, I told you I've stopped noticing the things that are different, but in Europe, it's a much more relaxed lifestyle. People are they stand outside the pub because they go outside to smoke, and they take their drink with them.
Yeah, well, in Spain, everybody does
there are places where that gets you arrested.
In Spain, everybody does that botellón thing, right? And they stand out with either a beer or a wine, and then the cops come and say, oh, you guys got to go, and say, oh, okay, and they kind of walk away, and then 30 minutes later they're back.
Right. Here's one. I may have brought this up once before. I believe it was about 5 months ago that I parked my car in a strange place over on Huertas, not in Centro. And finally, the cops in San Miguel don't even look at you. They don't even make eye contact with me, it seems like, in San Miguel. I don't know. I'm sure other parts of Mexico may be different. I don't know. But what they do is they simply take your license plate. And so you need your license plate. And so actually, my girlfriend Cecilia happened to be downtown, and I called her. I said, somebody took my license plate. She goes, oh, see, I saw the police officer walking by. It was an Arizona plate. So she saw him as he walked by with my license plate and knew it was mine. So I had to go down there, and I paid him a little bit of money. I got it back. But I decided not to put it right back on the place where it goes. I stick it in my back window where they can't touch it again. I've been driving around for 5 months now. Nobody has done shit about this. Nobody even cares. I go on road trips everywhere. Now, in the U.S., with this enormous structure that is dedicated not only for any philosophical reasons, supposedly, for having this big police state, but also because they've got all of these police on the payroll and the judicial system and everything like that. You got to be afraid every time you go out in your car. I had a friend who lives here in San Miguel go back a few weeks ago and said, man, every time I got out on the road, there'd be a cop that'd get behind me and I'd start shuddering. You know, you just don't have that here. Another thing you bring up, Pete, on our Facebook page about freedom, in quotes, you said, yeah, plus your freedom allows you to keep 50% of your lifetime earnings, and your kids and grandkids will help pay the difference while they live in freedom. For that price, they should at least get lessons to baa like a sheep. How much is a master's degree in bleeding? So talk about that for a minute. Let's just talk about the financial, quote unquote, freedom that exists in some of these large government countries.
Yeah, you read that back, I sound like kind of a sarcastic prick.
No.
But, you know, this is what irks me, because I pay a lot of attention to the issue of freedom. It means a lot to me. And I already told you that there's a definition that I use that is, it's actually measurable. I mean, it's mathematically measurable, the definition that I use. And so when people use the term loosely, it really irritates me. And, you know, living in a system where you are expected to surrender approximately half of everything you produce your whole life, it just strikes me as absurd for anyone to consider that living in freedom. And, you know, slavery is a very strong word, and particularly in the United States, it brings up issues that go back to, you know, a very aggressive form of slavery that was anti-human. But when you are under the control of another human being, and that human being can say, go to work all day, and I get half.
Yeah.
It's not a stretch to call that slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the same as having an iron manacle on your ankle and being beaten and deprived, but it's from the same tree. It's taking a person's life and property away from them without their consent. And that's why I'm sensitive to the issue of people talking about what wonderful freedom they have and how I should be grateful that I have it too, because we disagree about what the definition of freedom is. And there are places you can live where the state is not all powerful and just simply does not have the resources to follow you around all day, either physically or electronically, and monitor every single transaction that you have and every handshake you make with another human being, so that it can take an arbitrary amount from that transaction. There's lots of places in the world where you can just quietly live on your own terms. And when you experience that, it changes you. Because you realize that, you know, half the stuff you grew up believing is BS, you know, and it's a hard thing for any person to realize that, you know, that half the stuff you grew up believing and people who you love and respected told you was true. And you have to come to the point where you go, you know what? He was mistaken. That it's actually not true.
And you have to come to grips with the fact that you yourself were mistaken too, that you allowed yourself to engage in this self-deception. That's exactly the story of my background.
I can admit that I'm mistaken. It's harder for me to admit that my mother and father might have been mistaken, because I have huge respect there. And it's harder to admit that, but that's the case. If you check your premises and you operate from definitions that are objective and particularly if they are measurable, then you start to realize that a lot of the things you're told just aren't true. And when just on the surface of it, just financially, which is not the only way to measure, but just financially, the fact that half of what you make all your life is taken away from you, whether you agree or not. That's one thing. And then there's all kinds of other things that, you can't do. You can't go marry three people. If you want to marry three people, someone with a gun and a badge is eventually going to show up and tell you can't do that. If you feel like you would like to help somebody in Somalia or somebody in Syria.
Yeah, just don't bring up Somalia, okay? It's best to stay away from it.
I'm going to say Syria because there's a war there, right? Somebody's living in Damascus. Some guy is living in Damascus, and he's a good guy. He's a mechanical engineer. He's well educated. He's got a family, but he lives in Damascus and the city's being bombed. And if I say, I'd like to help that guy, I'm going to invite him to stay at my home. I've got a home in Texas. I'm going to invite that guy's family. They can stay with us. I'll look after him. You're not allowed to.
Right.
You don't have the freedom to do that. Mm-hmm. And there's, if you decide you want to sell a kidney for $50,000, you're not allowed to do that. Right. So if you're not, then who owns your kidney?
Right.
Just on a fundamental level, if you aren't allowed to do that with your body, if someone with a badge and a gun steps into the picture and says you can't do that, then who does own your kidney?
Right.
And how is it you call yourself a free person?
Right. Yeah. And so, when we talk about the subject of freedom, we're talking about people's being able to make free choices. And, I've seen it throughout my life. I identified rather early in my early 20s that I wanted to be an entrepreneur and that I felt a little bit enslaved by a job. But I've met people all of my life who are perfectly happy to be an employee, for some company or something. That's fine if that's what they really want. Furthermore, as it relates to this subject, if there are people who just have this feeling of confidence and security in the United States or any other country, okay, that's absolutely fine. What's sad, though, is what you're talking about, Pete, is that if they're just fooling themselves, James, you make the very, again, practical point in your argument. I don't think I need to remind anyone that the U.S. has by far the highest per capita prison population in the world. That fact alone disparages the myth of the United States being the land of the free or any kind of bastion of liberty. And so people can tell themselves, I live in the land of the free. People can tell themselves, well, it may not be perfect, but it's the best place out there, They can tell themselves that politics is just silly, that the government is very inefficient in their spending of the U.S. tax dollars. But still, they come to its aid when an argument comes up. I've heard different arguments saying that the amount of tax dollars that actually gets down to the people it's supposed to help is anywhere between 10 and 30%, the rest of it all being wasted on these ridiculous bureaucratic systems. Many people will accept that, but still say, what you gonna do? Let's support it. That's the sad part, is that go ahead.
I agree. I agree 100%. And, it goes to the point I made earlier, which is, democracy is okay, but we need something that works better. And I think the reason that, about 50% of people still show up and vote on election day, like a lot of people figured it out and they're not going to go vote. But the people who do go and vote, it's because there's no viable alternative. They don't see the other system that could take over from the crappy one that's out there. You know what people agree with in every country? They've got lousy politicians.
Right.
Everybody agrees.
Except in Korea, in North Korea, they love him.
If you say, I love your country, but I'm not too sure about your politicians, the people will go, yeah, you're absolutely right there. You nailed that. They're terrible. Everybody hates politicians, but half of them still go vote, and B, nobody can really point to an alternative to what we have, which is why I say, we need to build a system, which I have a name for. I call it a contractual republic. But, we need a system that simultaneously protects 7 billion people, protects their lives and property from anybody claiming, look, I rule over you. I get to make the rules. You have to do what I say. We need a system that facilitates that, and we haven't built it yet. We don't have it. And all I say, and this goes back to our free state friends, all I say is, in the meantime, until we have that, save yourself. Go live your life on your own terms. You guys know one of the businesses I have is called Resilient Personal Freedom, and the tagline on that is life on your terms, because that's your best shot at freedom right now at this point in the 21st century. Your best shot at freedom is to engineer a way to live your life on your terms. And I think that people are better served focusing on that than they are, as James says, putting all our energy into, fighting a behemoth system, because, your energy goes into fighting this multi-trillion-dollar Leviathan instead of focusing on your own happiness and having your own life on your terms.
Right. And so you have this program, Pete. The link is Safely Leave the Rat Race. We've had it on the Borderless website for some time. You call it Resilient Personal Freedom, Living Life on Your Terms. And so you have an actual plan for helping people figure out a way today, given all that's available to them, that they can live, travel, and work wherever they want.
Well, as a practical matter, as you guys know, because you talk about being borderless all the time, there are people who say, I'm with you. I get it. I want to do it. But, I'm living in Cincinnati and I got this job and I need that income. I gotta have that income, so I can't go move to Costa Rica. So the single biggest issue with most people is I need portable income. I need some kind of income that could go with me if I go live all over the world. And since I've been doing that for so long, I've had an internet business since 2001, and I've been living all over the world, as we said off the top. I'm coming up on 10 years. We have a business where we help people create an online business of their own, doing something that is important to them. Again, life on your terms. Do work that is maximally interesting to you and fulfilling, and because it's online and generates that portable income, you go do it wherever you want. Go live in San Miguel de Allende and make good money without having to get permission from the Mexican government to be an employee or have a work permit or any of those things. You can just quietly go move to Mexico and rent a place and have a great life. And all the while you have online income that is more than enough to meet your goals and live life on your terms.
Yeah, and what I want to say, kind of a positive note, is that what you're talking about in the Freedom app, and what a lot of people talk about, what a different type of system might be, maybe a more privatized system in different ways. I think that people that are able to have this location independent income, a lot more people are doing freelancing and stuff like this. I mean, this is a huge growing movement, especially within my generation, and it's happening. And it's going to cause about a change in how we structure ourselves. I mean, if you don't see that the welfare state, the nation state is collapsing in on itself right now, then you're blind. Okay, this is an anarchistic system. We're going to a completely different. We don't know what it might look like on the other end. There's a lot of people that theorize in different ways. There are people like Pete that put together what they would like to see, and new ideas and stuff like that. But it's going to be a change. So I honestly think this idea of I'm just going to sit here in the United States or wherever and fight for a dying system. I mean, it's just not. It's not viable. I don't understand what are you fighting for? You want to, continue the United States government, the federal government? I mean, look at it. It's a complete joke. Look at the debate now. I mean, who are the candidates? Who's going to be the president of the United States that's going to change or do anything? It's a clown show. Well, I don't want to spend any time thinking, fighting, or doing anything else to support that. And anyways, they're done. They're gone. There's so many ways to bypass these systems, especially with information technology and stuff that we have today, that I just think that it's a giant waste of time. So,
yeah. Talking, the talk about fighting worries me, because there's a fine line between, the concept of a philosophical, intellectual fight and the people who would choose violence. I want to have no part at all of the violent side of things, and it's not a successful tactic anyway. There's nothing good to be said about it, and the banks are insiders that can they get tremendous advantage because of political favoritism. And it's hurting everybody. But, what are you going to do? Smash windows at your local bank? Who are you going to fight? You start a bank on fire? What does that do? It's futile, and it plays into the hands of the people who hold the force. So, that stay and fight is a worrisome concept to me, because, just what kind of fighting are people talking about? Because destruction doesn't help. I think that being outside of the system and legally not contributing to it starves it.
Yes.
And between the starvation that peaceful people can help create and the massive financial debt that gets worse and worse, there's a collapse is inevitable. So I think that it behooves people to make a plan for what they would do under a scenario where there's a substantial financial, and I don't even want to say correction, because beyond any correction, there has to be some kind of a collapse. You can't owe $200 trillion in debts and promises and somehow manage your way out of that. It's a mathematical impossibility. So there's some very, very bad times coming when the money gets turned off for all these people who rely on it. And I'm not talking about poor people who have to have welfare. There are whole industries. 50% of Boeing's annual income comes from defense spending. Mm-hmm. What happens when that tap starts to get shut off? Yeah. A lot of people are out of work. A lot of people don't get their pension money.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess there are two potential answers to the other side of this argument with people who, as you said, Pete, we kind of look at as our brothers. They would say either revolution, okay, or they would say changing from within, such as is the case with the Free State Project people. So, right. More power to you guys if you think that can happen. I know that the future, I'm not good at predicting it. And if you think you can do that, good for you. No disrespect, at least from me, if you think that you can do that. I just don't. I don't think that can happen. 49 years old. I want to go live my life. I want to enjoy my life. And I don't want to have to, I just don't see it possible. I see no evidence that either the politicians or the people voting from them are changing in any meaningful way.
Well, look at how long Ron Paul tried to change it from within.
Right.
And by his own admission, he had no success whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. And so there we are.
Those are his words. When he retired, he said, it hasn't made any difference. It can't be changed from within any more than, if you got the right guy to run the mafia, the extortion would stop. Right. If we just got the right guy, the criminal enterprise would stop.
Right.
Government is organized force. It's organized coercion against people, and that's what it does. So what we really need is we need a better system, and it's going to take a long time to build a better system, because you have to build a way to protect all that property simultaneously. That's going to take some time. I think it can be done. There's no natural law that says no, it's impossible to protect everybody's property because of something, because of electrons. It's impossible. There's no natural law that makes it impossible for everyone to live a free life. But it's going to take time to build what we need to protect everybody and his property. But in the meantime, I say, find a way to live your life on your own terms. You'll be more productive. You'll be happier. It's better for your family. It's just all upside.
So, should liberty lovers leave the United States, finding one's haven abroad versus banding together at home? Our guest on this week's Borderless podcast, Pete Sisco, he agrees with James Guzman, and I have to admit myself, trying to be all in between here, but the answer is free your mind, vote with your feet. And so thank you very much, Pete Sisco, for coming on the Borderless podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's been great.
Okay, so Pete Sisco is a great guest.
Absolutely. Yeah, we love having him on.
Great guest last time, great guest this time. I even took him up on his engineered strength workout thing, which is a beautiful business idea and is packing muscle on my body.
Getting buff, huh?
Yeah, 18 minutes is all it takes me to do this thing. Oh. It's ingenious. People should check it out. I like it.
Let's check that out.
Yeah. Anyway, we've got a lot of other guests that we're planning on having on the podcast, and we're talking about also creating some programs that you could benefit from, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, soon we're going to have right now I'm putting together a series of videos that I want to help people, if they're thinking about doing this, maybe they're having trouble with, a bank account or how the immigration works, or, even their digital presence, how to kind of diversify their digital presence, or different things like that. I'm going to put together a series of videos for people that can help them kind of dip their toe in the water at a low level, and also some forums where they can talk to people from all over the world. So that should be coming out very soon. I've been working hard on it, so I hope that people participate. And if you're into what we're talking about here and you haven't already, please go to borderlesspodcast.com and join the mailing list. You'll see a button that says free instant access, and that'll give you a link to the Borderless Network Facebook group, and you can go there for free and talk to all kinds of people. We have lots of activity there. Pete Sisco is one guy that has a lot of input, and you'll also get updates on what's going on, and how some different services or something might be able to help you. So, and also news, different things that affects people that are trying to live a borderless lifestyle. So, please join us. We'd like to have your input. And
by the way, thank you guys and gals for contributing to the Borderless Network Facebook page as well. And be looking for that. Another Borderless podcast coming up soon.
Thanks for joining us for the Borderless podcast, traveling, investing, and living beyond borders.